All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. My name is John Pingle. I'm Director of Corporate Relations for the Stagner Sales Excellence Institute at the University of Houston inside the Bauer College of Business. Today, I have two of our other directors with us. First is our Executive Director, Randy Webb, and I also have Carl Herman, who's the Director of Executive Education. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us.
Great to be here, John.
Good to be here, John. Thanks.
So the purpose of our conversation today is to talk about hiring the right salespeople. Right? This is obviously a topic of concern for many of our partners and the companies that we consult. And so we wanted to just get in a room and have a conversation about your experiences and also some of the things that we train some of these partners on. So first, let's just start off. Randy, you talk a lot about the most important job of a sales leader. What do you think that is?
I think it's hiring, training, and developing the best people. And it starts with hiring good people. Because if you make a mistake there, you're going to pay for that mistake for a very long time. So I think that it begins and ends with hiring. And then you train them, develop them, and move them on. So I would say hiring is probably the most critical thing that a manager does.
Yeah, I would agree. I've hired quite a few salespeople in my career, and what's real clear is that if you hire the good one, your sales manager job is easy, and if you hire the wrong one, it's a very painful period of time before you figure that out and do something about it.
The other thing, John, is that you want to hire the best people because A players hire A players.
Right.
So if you hire a C player, who are they going to hire?
More C players.
More C players. So that's why it's so important to hire the best people.
In your experiences from working in your own organizations, but also consulting many organizations, how do you think overall, average, how do you think organizations do at hiring the right salespeople?
Not very well.
No?
Which is why they have the turnover they have.
Yeah.
Take sales managers, for example, even putting sales managers in jobs.
Mm-hmm.
That there is research that shows that 40% of all new sales managers fail within the first 18 months.
Mm.
And the number one reason? Lack of training. So if you've got inexperienced sales managers doing your hiring for you, then it's just a recipe for disaster.
Wow.
Yeah, I think in general, it's a lot like picking stocks. I think sales managers are about as successful as flipping a coin. I think seriously, about 50% of most people that are hired are good, and 50% of most of the people that a sales manager hires end up not working out in a relatively short period of time. And things can be done to improve those ratios, but I think left to their own devices or left to HR, which does a wonderful job putting together the processes to hire someone, but left to HR. Well, hiring is an example, one of those jobs that's too important to leave to HR.
Right.
The sales manager, the hiring manager needs to be a significant part of that process.
So is it an issue, you think, when we talk about hiring sales managers first, right, the sales leaders, is it just that they're hiring the wrong sales managers or promoting the wrong successful salespeople into management, or is it that they're not providing the right training to sales managers to allow them or give them the skill sets to source and make hiring decisions?
I think it's all of the above.
Yeah.
I think that what happens is companies will take their best salespeople and then they will promote them to sales manager thinking those skills are transferable. And then they don't give them any training on motivation, on hiring, on developing people, motivation, all those things that a good manager knows how to do.
Right. So
and then what happens is then research actually shows on hiring salespeople, Carl's absolutely right. It's a 50-50 shot in the dark because actually research shows 50% of them are going to fail in the first 5 years, and most of that's going to happen in the first 2 years. So it's a big deal.
And most of the reason is their manager.
Yeah, people don't quit companies; they quit managers.
Right.
And the other thing that I would say is that the biggest mistake that most people promoted in the sales manager's role makes is assuming that the way they were successful is the same way that their people should be successful. So one of the things that our research shows is that one of the most effective thing, our time management research, the most effective thing a sales manager can do is spend time coaching their salespeople in how to be successful, coaching them once they have them. That's how they make them better. But if they coach them to be the way they were, and only the way they were, it doesn't grow them to be successful.
Do you have any examples of like kind of the formula some of the partners that we work with have in training sales managers? So, picking the right sales manager, but also training them up to be great sales leaders so they can hire the right salespeople.
That's a good question. I know that one of our partners, Hilti, is very focused on the career development of their people. And one of the things that I believe they do that is unique and very powerful is that Hilti managers all the way up the line, one of their key MBOs is, are they promoting people?
Right.
Are they getting people up and promoted? And that compensation plans work. We say that all the time.
Yep.
And when you judge someone based on how well they whether they get their people promoted or not, they're going to hire the right people. They're going to coach the right people. They're going to do it. They're going to be motivated to move in the right direction. So I think in general, the answer to your question is no. I don't think we know of our partner organizations that do a superb job of the sales management process, but that's an example of a best practice.
No, I think they're a great example, right? Not only is there compensation models surrounding the strategy, but there is a formal strategy that involves HR, managing processes, and creating skill set expectations as you move from one position to another. You have to obtain these specific skill sets and have certain successes so that you're filling gaps and you're gaining experience in the right areas before you become leadership. And it's from top down. Everybody in the organization follows the processes that sales managers and HR builds, but then it breaks down to a monthly conversation between you and your boss, right? Your immediate boss, about where you want to go and how are you going to get there? What are you doing really well in your job and what are you not doing well? And then you have quarterly conversations about it. And as a salesperson, your compensation is somewhat tied to how are you meeting these development goals as much as it is, are you selling the product? I think that's definitely helping them develop future leaders.
Well, the other thing, John, I think, and Carl mentioned is my compensation plans work. One of the things they do that I think is unique is they actually give their managers bonuses when their people get promoted. And as Carl said, compensation plans work. And I wish I had thought about that when I was running my business. I would have done the same thing. I would have implemented that, because what it does, it reinforces how important it is to hire, train, and develop your people, and you get rewarded for that.
No, I think it's great. And again, the topic we're here to discuss is how do you hire great salespeople? But I mean, what a better time to spend saying that the foundation is really built on you have to hire, train, and develop great sales managers first, so that they can hire great salespeople. So, let's answer the old question, or at least have the topic around: are salespeople born or are salespeople made? What are your thoughts there?
I think it's both.
A little bit of both.
I think it's both.
Is it like a 60-40, or is it the coin 50-50?
I think there's those people that have natural social skills where they're very comfortable with people. They have no problem at all going up and talking with folks. Can handle the rejection without an issue.
Right.
And I think that there are people like that are born. There are other folks, though, and we do it every day in our sales program, is we train on how to hire and how to be a good salesperson. So I think you can do both. I think some are just naturally gifted, but I also think it can be skills that can be trained.
What are your thoughts?
I completely agree with Randy. As you know, I believe strongly in something that an Invesco sales vice president said at one of our keynotes a few years ago, which is the two things that separate great salespeople from good ones are confidence and curiosity. I think that's a couple of traits that are really good to look at in the context of are they born or made.
Right.
Because you can improve any individual's confidence and curiosity with good training.
Right.
right? You can make anyone ask good questions, know to ask good questions. You can make anyone confident in their product that they're selling and in their ability to help customers. But some people are natively more curious than others. And some people are natively, it's a trait, they're more confident than others.
They're starting at a higher level than you could ever train some people to get to.
You can move your whole bell curve if you train people on asking good questions and being curious. But there are some people that are going to be on that right side of that curve that are just better at it.
Right.
No, I think that makes sense. So you've mentioned curiosity and courage. What are some of the determinants of successful salespeople? We know those are two. We talk about those two C's all the time. What are some of the other ones?
I think a big part of it is personality. And do they have those social skills? Do they have the skill of being able to think on their feet? For example, we call that cognitive skills. Is that the way their brain's wired, where they can really think on their feet and answer, overcome objections, ask good questions, and so on. So I still think those things can be trained.
Yeah, I think Randy talks all the time about attitude determines altitude.
Right.
So I think the number one thing that you need to do is hire for attitude.
Yeah.
Are they self motivated? Because you can't motivate somebody who doesn't want to be motivated. All that stuff is critically important, and I think we lose that sometimes. I also think just a couple of other skills that I think are really important is attention to detail. I think people buy, another cliche that we like, people buy from people they know, like, and trust. Well, the quickest way to lose trust is to not do something you say you're going to do.
Right.
And that almost always comes not from motivation, but from lack of attention to detail. And so I think that's a really important concept.
Let's go back to both of you are kind of making the same point, but we would argue that there's this baseline of, you have to, have confidence. You have to be curious. You have to have the right attitude. You can train skill, but you have to have the right attitude and motivation. Those are kind of baselines across all sales. But wouldn't you agree, though, that different personality styles, different skill sets that would determine success in a sales role is very dependent on the type of sales role you're going into? Key account salesperson or an account manager, managing a set of accounts versus a territory or a transactional salesperson are going to have drastically different sales skills outside of that basic baseline, right?
I would agree. I also think if you look at characteristics of successful salespeople, what do successful salespeople look like? And what they look like is, first of all, they have the right aptitude for selling. Carl mentioned, hire for attitude, train skills. I don't think you can teach somebody to have the right attitude. I agree with Carl. It comes from within. The other thing you can't fix as a manager is aptitude for selling. And you touched on that a little bit. What are the characteristics of a good salesperson? I think it's things like basic intelligence. I mean, you have to. In fact, Carl Sewell, one of our partners who owns Sewell, actually would tell you the very first thing he looks for is intelligence. He wants smart people. The other thing I think you look at is good communication skills. Can they communicate well?
Communicate their ideas and just use non-words.
And are they good listeners?
Right.
I believe that a good salesperson starts with good listening skills.
Right.
Because if they can't listen and hear that problem that they're trying to help that customer fix, I don't think they're going to be very successful and make the sale. Yeah,
you can't hear what the customer's saying and then analyze it and make sense of what they're talking about. It's going to be hard to translate into selling them a solution. That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too. I mentioned personality traits earlier. Some of those traits I think look at are they responsible? Do you have to worry about them getting up, especially outside salespeople? Do you have to worry about them getting up and going to work? You want responsible, committed salespeople.
There was just a quick story. When I first got hired into my first role, my manager used to give me a hard time because I was single and I was young. I lived in an apartment. I had a company car and no debt. right? And he was like, "You're the wrong person for this job.
Right.
I need you to go buy a house,
Right, exactly.
buy the most expensive car you can afford, get a credit card, get married, have kids immediately.
Oh, yeah.
Because then you've got some responsibility. Like you're going to have to get up every morning to take care of those
I
responsibilities."
remember when I made my very first sale, and I walked into the office, and my manager was so, and I told my manager I was so excited, and he said, "So now go out and buy something you can't afford."
Exactly.
That first commission check, just go make it happen.
Yeah, my first boss that hired me at Dial did the same thing. I never saw him more excited than when Gene and I got married.
Right.
Then we bought a house. Then we had our first child. And every time that something like an event like that, special event would happen, he'd call me and say, "I got you now. I've got you now."
Not going anywhere.
You're not going anywhere. I got you.
No, I think that's a good point, though.
Yeah.
Having some kind of responsibility or just a history of being responsible for things.
Well,
is
and the
important.
other thing that we're not saying, but that needs to be said, is the traits associated with honesty, integrity,
Sure.
ethical
Yeah.
behavior.
Absolutely.
And those are so important in any role, but in a sales role where you really are judged based on making a specific number and performing at a certain level, and that's public and out there and everybody knows about it. There's a temptation if you're not grounded the way you should be grounded to do things you're not supposed to do, and you have to hire honest people with integrity and ethics.
No, I agree. I think that's a good point. So let's talk a little bit about like before the interview. How do you encourage sales leaders to kind of analyze their territories to make the right hire for the right role, for the right customer base and what have you? Like, what are some of the things sales managers and sales leaders should be doing before they even get into the hiring process to decide outside of do they have character, intelligence, and these other traits? What are some of the things managers should be doing?
Training their folks on how to hire.
Well, if they're the hiring manager, like if I'm a hiring manager and I've got an open role, what should I do?
I think the first thing is, we facetiously talk about ABC, always be closing, always be interviewing.
That's a great point.
Always be interviewing. Because there's when you, as everyone knows, when you have an open position or you're supposed to be hiring, there's intense pressure on you to get that job filled.
Right.
And unrealistic pressure to get that job filled. And if you start from scratch, now I have an opening, then you're talking 3 months, 4 months, 6 months or more before you have someone, or a year before you have someone in that role productive.
Right.
So and besides, it's just good networking and good practice to always be talking to people about a position. Always be interviewing. That's step one.
Yeah. In fact, when we teach this, there's a saying that we've got that says, "Don't post and pray, hunt." Good salespeople are hard to find, and you have to constantly be hunting for good salespeople. The other thing is, and Carl mentioned the pressure that managers come under to hire and fill that job. There's one of my little webisms is the
pick of the litter.
Yeah, pick a litter. Thank you. Pick of the litter. My saying.
Carl knows your sayings better than you do now.
Thank you, Carl.
Yeah.
Pick of the litter. And pick of the litter.
Well, I've done it. That's why.
Pick of the litter. We've all done it. And the pick of the litter is this: you have a job description. You know what you're looking for in terms of characteristics of a good salesperson. You know what one looks like. And then for the first 30 days, you interview 10 candidates.
Right.
None of those fit your criteria, so you pass. Another 30 days goes by, and you interview another 10. And none of those fit your criteria, you let them pass.
Right.
90 days goes by, and you interview another 10, and none of those fit. So now you've interviewed 30 candidates, none of them fit. The opening, it's been open for 90 days. Then something interesting happens about the 90-day mark. The customers are starting to rumble because they're not getting service the way they were before when they had the territory filled. The salespeople you have making up for that open territory and calling on those customers, they're getting ticked because they're having to do that and let their customers slide. And then if you're picking up some of that territory yourself as the manager, you're getting ticked because you don't have time to do that either. Then your boss calls you And here's what the boss says. You've had that opening for 90 days. You obviously are in no hurry to fill it.
Right.
So if that's the case, I'm going to give you another couple of weeks to fill that job. If you don't, I'm going to take the headcount away. And I'll put it in another district where they can hire somebody and get going on this. So then what managers do is they feel all that pressure. They interview another 10 candidates. And instead of sticking to their guns and looking for the criteria that they know they need, they'll compromise and pick the best candidate of the 10 or pick the litter.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point. You talk a lot about, some of the primary causes of making bad hiring mistakes, right?
Yeah, the number one mistake reason managers make mistakes, number one reason is because of a flawed job description. Yeah. They don't have a good idea of really what the job is and what they're looking for. Right. And HR owns some of that. Yeah, absolutely. So I also think, though, it's incumbent upon the manager to make sure HR understands the job. Yeah. So I think many times you can't blame that on HR. It's the manager who has not done a good job explaining what the job entails and then the kind of person you're looking for and then the requirements for that position. And
then the second thing you talk about, like you said, they judge too soon. They're making rushed decisions.
Or taking too long to make a decision. Right.
Right. We're taking too long and then having to make, like you said, the pick of the litter.
Exactly.
And then you talk a lot
the other thing that happens too, because they feel pressure, is that they rush the interviews. Yeah. And they make hiring decisions based on a 30-minute interview. Right. Yeah. Versus really putting them through their paces. I have a saying that I use when I teach this that says you need to follow the rule of threes. The rule of threes is that you interview at least 3 people, 3 different times, in three different places. Okay. Okay. Now the places is important because if you're interviewing somebody in a formal interview, we've got a course in our curriculum that teaches our students how to interview well. You cannot make the decision just on interviewing. So I would always like to take them to breakfast or to lunch and get them out of the office setting and see how their social skills are. How do they treat the wait staff? Are they able to have a conversation and communicate well when they're not answering interview questions? So I think that 3 different place thing is important.
So if one is breakfast, what are some of the other suggestions?
Well, when I did hiring, depending on the level, I would go to dinner if it was a senior enough person, or if I was filling a key account role, for example. Sure. Okay. Then what I would do is I'd take them out to dinner with their spouse. Mm-hmm. Because if you're a good key account person, you can't worry about punching the clock from 8 to 5. There are times you have to take care of your customer. Sure. And I want to make sure the spouse is on board with that.
That's a good point.
Yep. And one of the other things about the hiring process that's important is Dr. Laban has done some research, or there is a body of research that we've used recently, and Dr. Laban has enhanced, that it's really important to have, when you're going through the hiring process, to create the correct psychological contract with the person you're hiring. And essentially that's a academic way of saying that the person you're hiring has to have the right expectations about what the job requires. Right. How much am I expected to sell? What is my activity expectation? What do I get when I'm successful? What does successful look like? Sometimes as hiring managers, we tend to make the job seem easier or less demanding than it really is, and that's an exact prescription for turnover.
It seems a lot in my experience that once the rapport piece has been built and you say that guy's a good fit or that girl's a great fit culturally, then I'm just trying to justify everything else. So I'm going to oversell how easy the job is because I just want them to accept us. Like after the rapport,
they're going to make more and they're going to work less hard to get it.
Yeah, and it's that over promise. Yep. All day, every day. Right. Absolutely. Let's talk about the interview process. Let's dig into this. This is a good point. So you mentioned Carl Sewell, right? In his interviews, he does some things to test intelligence. Mm-hmm. You talked about the 3-3-3.
Yeah, rule of threes.
Let's kind of dig into this a little bit. So I would assume at the dinner again, you're learning about spouse buy-in. You're getting a feel for if they just would fit culturally in the organization.
Absolutely.
Like, what are some of the other things that you're looking for in that interview process?
Well, usually, if you ask a lot of managers, well, we thought that was a pretty good candidate. Why didn't you hire them? And invariably, they'll say, well, I just didn't think they were a good fit. So what is fit? What does that mean? That means that every organization has its own culture. It can be the same company. It can be in the same sales office. But each sales office can have its own culture. And do they fit? So our recommendation, what we recommend is that you make sure that you have that candidate work with one of your salespeople.
Yeah.
And actually go out and do a ride-along, see what they do every day, and spend the whole day. Let them see what it's like. If companies have a policy against that for insurance reasons or whatever, then we recommend that they at least give the candidates some names to call of people that are in that job, so they can ask their questions, get answers from somebody doing the job, and find out what it's really like. Because the worst thing you can do is get them on the payroll, and then either having to fire them because you made a mistake, hiring mistake, or they quit on you in the first year or first 2 years. We asked one of our partners one time how much it cost them monetarily to recruit, train, pay them salaries, company cars, benefits, all that kind of stuff, if after a year they walk out the door. He said they invested $125,000 a year in new hires.
What's crazy about that is we just saw the stat not 3 months ago that says that the average millennial will have 2.85 jobs in their first 5 years. So this new hiring, this new workforce that's coming in, when the training costs are that high, that's a lot substantial.
In fact, Deloitte, millennials, because there's 80 million of them, Deloitte actually follows and surveys them every single year to find out what they're thinking.
And I don't think there's anything inherent in millennials, and Randy's done a lot more work in it, that causes them to have turnover. It's just that we don't understand. We don't do the things we need to do to make them loyal to the organization.
Sure.
But yes, we the 2.85 number is a scary number, and part of the reason why that's true about them is because we do have to treat them differently than we have past generations.
Sure.
But if we do, they'll stay.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, in fact, Deloitte, what they showed was they asked the question, do you plan on changing jobs the next 5 years? 2/3 of them, 66% said yes.
Crazy.
So what we advise companies to do and our partners is don't let them company hop.
Right.
Okay, they're going to job hop. Now you can do that within your company or somewhere else. So don't let them job hop.
Right.
And company hop. You provide opportunities for them within your own company, and then they'll job hop and stay with you, with your organization. Because look at the investment you have in them. And we find that that's a reasonable solution. In fact, I was at a dinner last night, and the head of training was saying that their experience with the millennials so far is that, in fact, she not only her experience at work, but her own son. She said that he's in his first job, working well, been there about a year, getting antsy, those kind of things. And then he had a manager that was smart enough to recognize it, and then gave him special projects to work on,
right,
to keep him challenged. The biggest enemy for millennials is boredom.
Right.
You got to keep them challenged.
And so, kind of going back to the interview process, right? I mean, when you think about fit, right, that definitely, you're testing them on their company culture, where they want to go, exactly, what their career aspirations are, right? So that's one piece of it. You talk a lot about in fit. You also talk about, will they be a fit job duties wise, right? How do you assess that? So again, Carl Soule assesses based, one of his assessments is intelligence. What are some of the ways that you would assess in an interview setting, whether it's the first one or all three of them, will they be a fit just based on the job duties and the skill sets required?
When people talk fit, what they're really talking about is personality. does that person have the personality that's going to fit the personality of their coworkers and the personality of our organization? And because fit's a kind of a funny thing, it's in the eyes of the beholder. And so I think that's why I think it's important for them to meet people that are actually doing the job. Who are their colleagues? It also gives you another opinion about them, whether or not they think they would be a good fit. A manager in a 30-minute interview can't make that determination. They just can't. It's just too
Sure.
So you have to get them exposed to other people and get their input.
And also, I think one of the other things that we need, again, it's not about the interview. You do the best you can in the interview, right. and rule of threes is an excellent best practice. But as we know, having been sales managers for a long time, the best predictor of future performance is past performance.
Right.
So for sure, you want to know that person has been a successful salesperson if you're hiring experienced salespeople. If you're hiring people, our students out of college, you still want to see that they've had performance goals and they've met them. That they want leadership positions. You can still base even hiring an inexperienced sales rep. You can still look to that whatever experience that person has had as the best indicator of future performance. And I think that's really a critical part of it. That you can't learn it in an interview. But back to the interview, there are a couple of things that we like to do. First, we do like behavioral interviews. We like interviews that cause the person to relate, to think on their feet. That's part of Carl Sewell's issue, right?
Right.
Find out how intelligent they are. Can they think on their feet? And can they come up with real examples from their life that are relevant in the life you want to put them in?
And I think that's important. That's what's great about a behavioral interview is tell me a time when. Like, give me a specific example of failure and you learn something or of success, right? It seems like a lot of people that are giving the interview answers are usually, well, here's what I would do in that situation. And that doesn't tell you anything about whether or not they'll be successful, right?
Carl's absolutely right. Past behavior is the best indicator of future behavior. And make them show you what they've done. And then ask them to give you references that you can call to confirm that that's what they've done and get those opinions. Research shows that actually 78% of resumes have some misleading information on them. Okay? So you can't rely on the resume. The interview itself is important, but that should not be the only thing you base your decision on. And I think that calling references is critical to making sure you're getting the candidate you think you're getting.
Most people, I would assume, take the references for granted. The person you call is probably a personal friend because I picked my references, or they're not going to be totally truthful because of laws and regulations on what you can and cannot say about a past employee. So how do you make that call successfully?
Well, first of all, you're assuming that they're giving you references that are going to say good things about them. You would be surprised. Okay? And here's what you pay attention to when you're doing reference checks. It's not what they say, it's how they say it, and what they're not saying. So, for example, let me give you an illustration. Used to, students would ask me if I knew them well, can I use you as a reference? And I would say, sure. I'd never get a phone call. Today, if a student asks me that, I always get a call. And let me give you an illustration. So let's say I have a student who's put me down for a reference, and I get an employer calling me, and we are limited to what we can say.
Right.
Okay, can't talk grades, can't talk any of those things about them. So but the way you say things is important. So how's Sally? How was Sally as a student? Sally was okay. She did okay. And I get another phone call that says, well, how was Joe in your class? Joe was phenomenal.
Right.
You see the difference?
Checking tone.
Absolutely. And what they're not saying.
Right.
Okay? So you can still, even though there's restrictions on what you can say and what you can't say, you can learn a lot by talking to their former boss or somebody they've worked with, one of the coworkers, just on the way they say what they say and how they say it and the tone and what they're not saying.
So who should be calling the references? HR, because that's part of the process, or you?
No, hiring manager.
Exactly. How do you think it normally happens, though?
HR.
HR is usually the one that
Some companies, too, are using third parties.
Yep.
Which is, for me, nuts.
That's who usually calls me when I'm a reference for one of our students. It's some third party one
I think that's nuts.
Is taking notes and answering or asking me 3 random questions.
Right. Because I want to, if I'm the hiring manager, I want to be able to hear those nonverbals over the phone.
Yeah. Right.
You know.
Let's talk quickly about assessments.
Yeah, I was just gonna go there.
Okay.
That's one of the things that a lot of our partners depend on assessments to one extent or another, hiring assessments, and it's our opinion that they're a piece of data. They're a piece of data, and it's worth accepting it as that. But using it as a bar, you either have to pass this, test, or we can't move you farther. Is a bad mistake. I'll give you one example. We had one partner many years ago that absolutely believed in assessments. If you didn't pass this test, then we couldn't consider you for a position, and they absolutely believed in it. They said, we know this works because the people that we hire are great. And Dr. Ahern asked them one question: how about the people you don't hire? Are any of them great? And that's the problem with assessments. You build an assessment that you think is perfect for you, but the people that don't pass the assessment, you can't evaluate their performance because they're not working for you.
Right.
So that's just one example of why we think assessments are good data, but absolutely not.
They're relevant, but shouldn't be the final deciding factor on someone moving along in the interview process to Randy's 3-3-3 interview.
Right. Yeah, I agree, absolutely agree. The thing is that sometimes those assessments are used as an excuse. You know, you talk to a candidate, don't like them, so they didn't do well in the assessment, so we're not going to hire them. So I think sometimes they're used as a crutch. I agree that, and here's the problem I have with assessments. You are taking the managers, your leadership, out of the hiring equation. And that bothers me. I think that a good leader, if you've got a good leader, wanting to hire the right people and the best people, should overrule that test. Because the other thing, the signal you're sending your manager is, I don't trust you enough to make this decision. So therefore, I'm going to have some third-party test to make sure that you're hiring the right person. I think it's a mistake anytime you take the management decision out of the process, anywhere in the process, and let a test overrule a manager is poor practice.
I mean, Carl said it earlier. Sometimes things are too important to leave to HR, right? Mm-hmm. HR is too important to leave to HR, and so that's a really good scenario that some standard set of questions left somebody out that may have been qualified, right? We have one of our partners that uses the Wonderlic test, which is the IQ test that they use for the NFL. And I love the way he does it because he looks at, it breaks down a bunch of different aspects of the person he wants to hire, but it never once puts him in a mindset of, well, I can't hire this person, I can't. All it does is dictate which behavioral questions he needs to focus on and which ones he doesn't. So instead of having 10 questions of one type to test entrepreneurial spirit, which is important in his industry, he's not going to ask those because it's many of those. You may ask one of those to confirm because, the Wonderlic test shows this person has high entrepreneurial spirit, but they may have low patience, right? And so now he's going to ask a lot of questions surrounding that one area that's low. All it does is help him form his interview strategy.
I think that's fine. Yeah. I just don't think the test should take the place of the hiring manager's decision whether or not to hire somebody.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So this is a long process. The first thing that comes to my mind for people that would hear this, especially in specific industries, is Carl's telling me I have to interview all day, every day to keep my pipeline filled up. Mm-hmm. You're telling me once I find 3 people, I now have to do three interviews in 3 different locations. And then the interview process is like, this is this takes a lot of my time. I'm also supposed to be developing and leading my current sales team. How do you balance all this?
Well, first of all, the three interviews doesn't all have to be you. In fact, I'd recommend that it's not you. I'd recommend that you include other people in the process, because I think they will see a different perspective. I also think that we talk about behavioral interviews. A lot of our partners are doing panel interviews as well. More and more of them are having 3, 4 hiring managers, and maybe 3 and an HR person, but 3 or 4 on the panel to do the interviews. And I think that is actually a good practice, because those people are going to see that candidate differently, and we may ask different questions as a result of how they see that candidate.
Sure.
So I think that's probably a good way to find out whether or not that candidate really is a good fit.
But you still, now other people in my organization. Now,
Sure.
It doesn't.
It's a time. So
it is time consuming.
This is heresy. I understand that, but the number one job of a sales manager is to hire, train, and develop the right people, not make quota.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very point.
Not make quota. So, I say it that way because what we tend to do is err on the other side, right? We tend as sales managers to spend too much time working on the numbers. We're working on our forecast, working on our pipeline, helping our salespeople close deals, not coaching them, helping them close deals, and you're much better off shifting that, so that if you err on the side of spending more time hiring, training, and developing, rather than managing the number. Then the number will take care of itself.
Actually, I think it's. I agree, and I think it can be a little worse than that. Managers, when they spend their time working with their salespeople, who do they spend the most time with?
The best salespeople.
No,
the worst salespeople. Right.
The worst
Right.
salespeople. Thinking that they're going to be able to get them up to speed. And because in many cases they've made a bad hire and they don't want to fix it.
Right.
Which I think is the worst crime.
Right.
Is not fixing a mistake, because we all make them. It's what you do with those mistakes that matter. And some people just don't have the aptitude for selling it. You made a mistake, so you're not going to fix aptitude. You're going to have to make a change. And research shows if you spent that same amount of time with your best salespeople to help improve their skills, your return on that investment is going to be much greater than all the time you spent working on with the worst performing,
trying to save the unsavable.
Right. And so it can be a vicious circle if you're not careful. And then what happens is those best salespeople say, "You don't care about me.
Right.
You don't appreciate what I'm doing."
It's at least creating the culture that best salesperson feels like they should always be left alone, that they shouldn't be coached, right? Because you're not with them. You mentioned time, and we're out of it. One last question: Why should somebody hire a PES student from University of Houston?
A couple of reasons. One thing we didn't talk about that I think is worth talking about is the value of diversity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm not saying this for EEO reasons. Diversity sells. When you have a diverse sales organization, that sales organization will perform better than if you don't. Research shows that, but more importantly, we see that here among our PS students. We see that every day. As University is the most diverse public university in the country, our College of Business very diverse, and our PS students reflect that diversity, and we see the value of that. So one reason to hire PS students is because you are hiring from a diverse pool. So
and it's important when you say diversity. It's not just ethnic diversity.
No.
The range of experiences, where they come from, different countries, different family situations. We have students that are 19 and students that are 43. That's the diversity you're talking about.
So, and to get back to how that impacts your specific question, John. So, regardless of whether you're hiring from PS or whether you're hiring college students, your pool of candidates should be diverse.
Yep.
Because diversity improves performance, okay, and will continue to accelerate the ability to improve performance. But, so if you want your pool of potential hires to be diverse, come to PS.
Yep.
Because we are. Number two, the best indicator of future performance is past performance. Our students have been successful executing the sales process, or they don't get out of our program.
They sell a real product, they carry a quota, they feel the pressure of 49 no's in a row, and they still have to make that 50th call, and that 50th call has to be a yes. If they don't hit that quota, they don't move on. So they've got examples. When you ask them a question, tell me a time when, they can talk about hitting 500% of quote, or hitting that 49th call and how hard that was and what they learned from it. Specific examples in a real world selling situation.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
exactly.
And I could go on and on. Work ethic.
Mm-hmm.
Our students, 60% of our students work to pay their way through school.
Yep.
Things like performance. They perform. Carl Sewell wants intelligence. Our students have to have a 3.0
right.
to get into the program. So you could go on and on with why you should hire PS students.
I think the other thing is research shows that if you take a sales student versus a regular college student and hire them in selling, that they are going to have 50% faster ramp-up time.
Yep.
And 30% less turnover. Okay? That in and of itself, and I agree with Carl, all those other things he mentioned are absolutely important. But I think the biggest reason is we can show that our students hit the ground running. And that is, if you don't hire a PES student, that is volume you're never going to make up.
Yeah.
Okay, if you got $1 million territory, take 50% faster ramp-up time in that first 3 months. Okay, that's $250,000. That's $250,000 lost.
Yep.
That you will not make up.
Absolutely.
So the return on the investment, we can prove the return on the investment by hiring our kids based on sales, their sales ability and what they've done in the past. We had the chairman and CEO of BMC at our last graduation, sales graduation, for example. Yep. And he pointed out that one of our PES students last year made $1.1 million on their W-2 form. Now, the interesting thing he didn't say in his talk, but told me later, was that our PES student was his top salesperson. Okay?
The whole country.
The whole country. Yeah. It was the top salesperson. So I think in and of itself, the return on the investment is worth hiring our students.
Yeah. Well, guys, I appreciate your time. I know you're both busy, but for those listening, if you want to learn more about the Steven Stagner Sales Excellence Institute, or you want to learn more about this topic, hiring the right salespeople, building sales teams, developing sales strategies, hiring and developing sales leaders, which was the very first thing we talked about, you can go to our website, which is bauer.uh.edu/SEI, or you can send us an email, give us a call. We'd love to talk to organizations large and small about this topic, and we do regularly. So, Randy, Carl, I appreciate you, and look forward to our next conversation.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.